our next segment for today is none other than Mr. Anthony Garreau, who is the VP of Partnership at Football Marketing Asia, or FMA. And he is here to share about sports marketing when your passion meets work. So, Mr. Anthony, please do join us over at the front. And to those of you who are here, do give him a warm round of applause. All right, so we're going to start with a couple of questions for Mr. Anthony. So I guess the first question would be, could you share a bit more about what led you to pursuing your passion?
Hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me here to speak today. Well, it's very simple. I just started playing football when I was 5 years old, and I just love this sport. And then being a professional footballer was obviously my dream, but quickly realized that I was not good enough. Not bad, but not good enough, because there's a big competition in this space. So then you just try and find ways to connect to that sport through other ways. And then one of these was through business. And there's a lot of exciting opportunities to work through the business of sports. So that's why I'm going to share a little bit more what I do. That's basically why, yeah.
Okay, that's great. So if it doesn't work one way, there's always another way.
Right, you can be a referee, you can be a ball boy, you can be a water boy, anything that gets you close to the sport that you love. You get some joy into it. Some of those pay you a bit better than the others, for sure. But so yeah.
All right, well, I won't keep everyone else waiting. So once again, here with us today is none other than Mr. Anthony Garreau, sharing with us sports marketing when passion meets work.
Thank you. I just drafted a few slides for you guys to understand where actually sports marketing sits and what it is. And basically at the end, I'll just share with you what I do. So what I do is about Asian football. So I'll also share with you what actually AFC is and what we're doing on a daily basis, and also what kind of jobs we have within our organization at Football Marketing Asia. And then I'll share with you my career path, if that interests anyone, just to kind of show you where I come from, how I got there. And then we can talk about any questions you have. So what is sports marketing? I think that's the basic point. So you just got to start defining what marketing is. And I'm not going to bore you with all marketing, lessons or classes or anything. It's more about just trying to put where sponsorship sits and sports marketing sits in that scope. So marketing is basically the activity and processes for creating and communicating and delivering product and services that offer value to the consumers. That's exactly what it is, and that's all it is. There's a lot of long definitions about it, but that's basically a simple one that I quite like. You've probably heard of the 4 Ps, and I'll go very quickly just to try and see where sponsorship sits. So to do good marketing, you need to be able to create your product or your service, price it correctly, deliver and put it in the shelves or put it into a marketplace. And the last one is to promote it. And this is where sponsorship actually sits, in the promotion of your product. So you need to have all of these to be able to do sponsorship and sports marketing. So if we look at promotions, you can promote it through direct marketing, sales promotions, digital marketing, personal selling, mouth to mouth, going door to door, general advertising, PR, all of these. But you can also do sponsorship, and it's very, very effective. And I'll give you examples in a minute. It's very, very effective. So what is sponsorship now that we've established what marketing is and what you need to promote your product? Sponsorship is a powerful marketing tool that is used by marketers to increase brand awareness. That's the first point. Build image of your product or your service or your brand, and drive sales. Those are the 3 key top line objectives of sponsorship. So I'll give you a few examples of big sponsorship in the world that you probably all know. The Coca-Cola company with the World Cup, obviously big sponsor. They also sponsor the Olympics. They sponsor the biggest event, right? We'll see why in a second. Visa, also a big sponsor of the Olympics. C Group, a bit closer to us. The Lion City Sellers, they are acquired and sponsored by the C Group, Shopee, Garreau, all those guys. Standard Chartered with Liverpool FC and so on. There are millions of cases, not only in football, but in any sport. Okay? Now, why do marketers, and then when I say marketers, basically I sit on the other side of the marketers, but I need to understand how they're thinking so I can sell them sponsorship. That is the key thing here. So why marketers use sponsorship for their product and services. So basically is the first thing is awareness. If your product is not known, no one knows about it, it will never be bought, right? So it needs to be known first, to then be liked. So the consideration is very important. And once your product is out there, people know it, and people like it, then they will buy it eventually, okay? You cannot be bought if you're not liked, and you cannot be bought if you're not known. That is kind of basic principle, but it's really important because we base all our sponsorship pitches and sales pitches onto this, basically. So let me give you an example with Coca-Cola and the World Cup. So how do they do this? How Coca-Cola does awareness, consideration, and purchase through the World Cup property, which is a rights holder football. So the first thing is awareness when they put their brand around the pitch, and the World Cup is the most viewed sporting events of all time and in the world, and it's actually seen and televised in every single country in the world. So that is a guaranteed reach and awareness for the brand. So if you have a new product, we all know Coca-Cola, but if you have a new product and you want to be looking at to be seen in just in the space of 1 month, you just sponsor the World Cup, you got your brand everywhere around for maybe 10 minutes per match, and that is an easy one. That costs you a lot of money, but that's an easy one to kind of get known, right? And that doesn't stop here. So obviously, Argentina won the World Cup. The streets of Buenos Aires were absolutely full. They all watched the game. It was basically all the brands around the World Cup matches were always seen by a lot of people, right? So that's how you drive awareness through sponsorship. There's plenty of other examples, but that's probably a very kind of basic and strong example. Now, how do they actually drive the fact that they want to be liked more than Pepsi, for example? So, well, the first thing is World Cup means joy. So winning the World Cup is something that is nice and that has got a value of like you feel good about it. And that's what they're actually tapping into, right? So why sports sponsorship is good for all the brands, because you connect with the fans in an emotional moment. And people make irrational decisions when they're emotional, right? And if you're a fan, or if you're not a fan, if you like Messi, if you like football in general, you just feel good about the World Cup because it's a great event and it's joy, it's fun, and whether you like football or not, you can realize that is something that you feel good about it. So that's why they associate themselves with an event like this. Therefore, you hope that the fans are actually getting the same feeling about the brand than they are about the World Cup. And purchase, I mean, you've seen this everywhere in shelves. They use the sponsorship rights to kind of target, each market and create special cans that look, quite nice, and they are highly related to a team. So if you're a fan of Argentina, you'll buy a can, from Argentina, and you feel good about it. You want to collect them. So that you got to think about this in the perception of you have a Pepsi bottle on the right-hand side that has nothing on it, it's just Pepsi. It's a bit flat, I'd say. They can do something with cricket, if they are a sponsor of cricket, for example. But then you've got this on the shelf next door, and then which one you're going to go? Again, because you feel good about the World Cup, because it's something that you connect with. There's a lot of fans of it, so therefore you're going to buy their can. And that's how they drive awareness, consideration, and purchase. This is quite simplified, but this is basically the idea of sponsorship in general for marketers. Any question on this just now? Sorry, I'm probably not allowed to do. Sorry. You can ask at the end. I can go back on the slides. So I talked about the World Cup, I talked about Liverpool, I talked about the Olympics. So if you think about, and that's going to actually relate to what jobs there are in sports actually, it's quite interesting. So what types of sports properties that brands can sponsor? So the first one is players and athletes. You would know that Ronaldo, Son Heung-min, Joseph Schooling, who was a Tag Heuer ambassador for a long time, I think he still is, Virat Kohli in India. So they all, they're themselves a sports property, and the athletes, and then they call endorsements, play endorsements. So it's the same thing. A brand will actually go into Ronaldo because he's got millions and maybe billions of followers and people like him. Sorry if that's the first thing. A lot of followers, people like him. So then you got to feel good about your brand. And therefore then if he recommends, like, I don't know, Head and Shoulder shampoo, people will buy it because he uses it. And that's exactly the same funnel again. The second one is teams. So you can be a sponsor of the Federation of Singapore Football, the FA. You can also be a sponsor of Manchester City, Barcelona, Golden State Warriors. Any kind of team has the same kind of idea of it, and the same principle applies as why people are doing sponsorship. And the last one is competitions. So that's what the World Cup we saw, the Olympics, the AFC Asian Cup, the Mitsubishi Electric Cup 2022, the Australian Open, the UEFA Champions League. So there's kind of the three buckets where, as a brand, you can go into sponsorship and do sponsorship with this kind of properties. So leading to, basically we got different properties for different goals. So it doesn't mean that you have to do one of each. You can do all of them, and then basically you have different goals, different outcome of sponsorship there. So leading to this, basically that provides job opportunities in each of those key categories. There's one missing, obviously. There's the one that we talked about before, is basically the brands. So you can actually hold jobs and positions and roles in each of those kind of key buckets in terms of sports marketing, right? So you can be an agent for players. You can be a sales person for those players. Ronaldo's got a team of probably 50 people behind him selling his image and sponsorship. He's got a lot of lawyers. Legal is really big in sports sponsorship because it's all about image rights and all of these. Teams, it's a bit wider. You've got salespeople, you've got operation people, you've got ticketing people, you've got marketing people. You've got a lot of different kind of roles. And obviously, competition's kind of the same. And brands, the tricky part with brands is really, really sexy job in sports marketing when you're head of sponsorship for Coca-Cola, but there's only one in the world. The head of global sponsorship is really, really hard. So in each of those brands, you basically have one or two persons. So it's really tricky to get to that position. And I'll talk to you about our company, what kind of jobs we have, and you've got a big array of jobs. Could help you understand a bit more what jobs you can do in sports specifically. So I'm just going to touch on the Asian Football Confederation. This is the governing body of football in Asia. So the AFC regulates, operates all football in Asia, and that is the property itself. So if I go back to that one, is the competition in the middle. It's basically a property itself, so rights holder, as we call them. And as you may know, they're under the FIFA umbrella, and they've got 6 other confederations, UEFA, and then the CONCACAF, CAF, CONMEBOL, OFC, and the AFC is one of them. It basically spans all the way from Lebanon in West Asia to Guam in East, up from Mongolia down to Australia, and covers the biggest countries in the world, such as China, India, Indonesia. So it's a big, big confederation. You might have heard of the key competitions that are basically regulated by the AFC. The qualifiers for the World Cup, the Asian Cup, the futsal, and then all women national competitions, all youth competitions, and also the club competitions with the AFC Champions League. And coming to FMA, So where I work for, basically, we are appointed by the AFC to help them commercialize all those competitions. So what we do, basically, we sell sponsorship, that we just talked about. That's kind of what I do. And then I've got another team that sell media rights, so the live rights. They'll sell it to Singtel, they're selling to Astro in Malaysia, and all that. So that is also a big revenue stream of the AFC. Just to give you a bit of insight on what are the jobs that we basically have, and it's a kind of top line, but I hope it helps you understand what kind of key business units we have. So obviously sales is the biggest one because this is where we create value and then we extract value from the market. So you've got sales teams selling sponsorships, like we talk to Coca-Cola, Standard Chartered, Visa, all those kind of people. Media sales, selling the live rights, like I mentioned. And then you've got strategy people and design to kind of support the sales teams. Then once you've done a deal, you've got people that account manage those partners. So whether it's in media or sponsors, they will basically deliver the sponsorship with them. Then we work with the AFC on the brands. So all the logos you saw here basically worked with us. We kind of help them come up with those new logos and also all the brand identity that goes behind. So it's football, but it's marketing, football. You know, how do we drive fan engagement? How do we create more digital social interaction? How do we use CRM in the world of football? So that's marketing. Operations, again, we basically deliver all those partnerships. So we need people on the ground to deliver the LED boards, to accompany the guests, to kind of go to the VIP and all the kind of sponsorship rights. So if you're more into the event management, this is really cool. We've got a team of about 50 people going on every single game that are played in the AFC region. So it's really, really fun if you like the event. Media production, content services, BI. So if you're more into research, you know, and then your passion is football, you can mix the both of them and then be, you know, a researcher for us to see how many fans are captured by the AFC competitions, how many people love football, how do we, you know, provide insights to pitch Visa, for example. There's plenty of business intelligence in our world, and then you've got the other kind of standard, I'd say, business units with legal, that do all the contracts for media and sponsorship. Human resources, as you know, they'll do basically the usual stuff. Finance, admin, and IT, basically. And so all the kind of people that or jobs that are actually in football marketing Asia, you can kind of assume they'll be the same in all the kind of properties within the teams and the leagues that we saw before. Another one that could be is ticketing. Like, we don't do ticketing, but there's a lot of ticketing involved in football, as you know, because that is a big revenue stream. So you can also be head of ticketing, work on ticketing. Right. Just a little bit more about me, how I got there. So what I did was a master's degrees in sports management, into which I basically worked at a ski company in the marketing. I worked at Nike in marketing as well. And then I did a MBA in sports marketing. And I worked at Eurosport in a new media department. Then I came to, so that was in France. Then I came to Asia. Worked for Eurosport, Asia Pacific, in the sales team. Then I moved to Singapore and worked for Fox Sports as a sales manager. So that was kind of TV. Then I worked for the International Champions Cup. I don't know if you guys remember, there's big clubs coming into Asia playing some friendly matches in pre-season. So we worked on this with the company. And lastly, I worked for FMA in 2018. So just one thing, I was listening to the lady just before. So she was saying something about different experiences. So here, there's a little gap actually. I'll tell you what I did. I basically went to London and then I was a bartender for 8 months, right? So after NBA, don't get me wrong, at some point I told myself, what am I doing there? But I was a bartender for 8 months, right? And just the idea was to kind of progress a little bit more in English and be more comfortable so I can eventually apply for jobs in sports in London. There was the Olympics as well, so I was pretty excited. What it did, actually, because if you know, probably the same here, but if you know the scene in pubs in the UK or anywhere, I'd say just a lot of different people. So I learned a lot in terms of sales because the British take the pubs very seriously. They're really, really organized in terms of sales, how you sell a more expensive beer, how you sell nuts with it, blah, blah, blah. And also, I worked with many, many different nationalities, right? And when I interviewed for that job in Hong Kong, the first thing that HR asked me is say, oh, are you ready to kind of leave France and then work with people from Hong Kong, people from, all of Asia? I say, well, actually, yes, because I've been working with a very strong variety of people in the pub. And then you can see, okay, that doesn't really help you, but actually it did, because I literally experience working with Asian people already there, with Eastern European people, American, Australian. So it really helped in that sense. The only thing is you need to know how to spin that story to not be like, okay, I went and have fun for 8 months. That is, I think, a good advice I could give you is each of those experiences, just try and actually extract the value that you got from that experience to the job that you're applying and trying to kind of use that in your advantage. Yeah? So I believe that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony Garreau. So it's time for Q&A session.
Sure.
That was really interesting. So a lot of the things you shared, as much as you made it more specific for the sports industry, it actually could be applied for many different industries as well, right? So let's maybe stand closer to the center just so we have a better bird's eye view of everyone. But does anyone have any questions for Mr. Anthony? Yes, okay, we have our first question over here.
Hi. I guess I'm just like you as well, I'm passionate about football, but not good enough to go into that world.
There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us.
But no, so then I went into business and administration, and I'm a student here in NTU. And I was wondering, for brands like big brands like Coca-Cola, everybody knows about them, everybody consumes Coca-Cola. So I was wondering, especially for the World Cup, would it really be worth it for them to be that sponsor? Because they already have a global presence everywhere. Yeah. And do they even grow even more than that? Did it have a bigger presence for them or no?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and that actually links back to, in sponsorship, there's a key thing which is called category, right? So once you have a beer partner, for example, in a club or any event, you cannot have another one. You usually sell as an exclusivity, right? So that is one thing. So in this space, there's basically two players, right? There's Pepsi and Coke, right? So for them at that point, it's not about growth anymore. It's about retaining their number one position or whatever they claim to be number one or not, So it's basically taking this and the Olympics to not have Pepsi take it on and grow even further. So it's a defensive move, basically. So once they become World Cup sponsor, no one else in this category can be a sponsor. So that's what it's a defensive move. You have that in payment system as well. Visa, MasterCard. Visa is the same. Like, they do the World Cup, it costs them a lot of money. Sometimes they probably lose money, to be honest. But it allows them to retain that position and not let MasterCard come in and then grow even further. So it's a defensive move, yeah.
It's actually quite interesting because even the terminologies are very similar to sports, right? It's either they take the lead or in this case, it's an offensive move, right? So I guess I would like to add on to that question as well. Like when brands actually go for sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, how does the organizations decide which brand they will be accepting sponsorship from, especially if it's just one brand? Do they bid for it or what are the procedures?
Yeah, so it depends which property you are, which rights holder. If you're the World Cup, usually you got people coming to you because it's such a big event. So being sales at the World Cup is actually quite nice. You got people, you don't really have to do go and get new brands. But now their challenge is to extract the biggest value out of this category. So they will go by category. So they will go, okay, we know payment system is a big category for us. So we're going to talk to all of them at the same time, and we're going to ask them to make an offer. So we've got a price, we've got a package with that many minutes of LEDs, number of tickets per match. Well, it's all like very detailed. But then you basically say, okay, you make me an offer, and then you try and go a MasterCard and say, okay, what's your offer? Visa has made one. And then you basically try and battle them against each other, so you get the highest price. So your answer is highest bidder, that's one thing. When they're big brands like this, it's fine. When it's very interesting because the crypto category was really strong, right? And they made crazy offers in the world of football and sponsorship in general. But the rights holder always been a little bit skeptical about this because they know it's kind of volatile, and then as we know now, that is kind of gone, right? So there's also a reputation factor when, especially the brand is very young, and then you don't want to have a sponsor that drops out because that looks really bad on the competition. So, and also obviously you look at what they do in the world, unfortunately, some brands don't have, really good ethics. So when you're the World Cup, you can actually afford yourself to kind of say, okay, I don't really like what you do as a business, and that is not right for our sports. So I don't want to associate that with you. But usually it's the way around. You actually take what's in the market to generate revenue. And then let's be honest, the World Cup, and you probably have seen all the FIFA documentary, but the World Cup, the AFC, all the money that goes into this is reinjected down to the clubs and member association that goes to football, grassroots and all that. So it's very transparent, the system. The AFC or even the FIFA doesn't take any, bonuses or anything. It's really go back to the grassroots football and the clubs. So the more money you make, the more you can finance and help the grassroots. And again, you get that sport bigger.
So it's like an ongoing cycle almost.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question. Does anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Anthony Garreau? Yes? No? You have another question? You could ask it.
Sorry, just because I'm super passionate about football. This is basically more targeted to FMC. So on
FMA.
your,
FMA.
FN, yeah. And how do you guys create a strategy where it is beneficial and have more wider reach for audience outside of Asia to watch the AFC? Because for me, it's all about time, and everybody's working busy nowadays. And a football match, is 2 hours.
Yeah.
So what are some of your strategies for other audience outside to watch AFC?
The first thing, I think, again, when you flip sponsorship and you remember that marketing team that we have, basically we become marketers, right? So we become, again, awareness, consideration, and kind of purchase. So it's the same thing back to us and say, how do we actually make ourselves known? So one way to do this is to actually sell or even give for free media rights to broadcasters outside of Asia. So now I believe it's about 180 countries that can actually see the AFC competitions all across the world. Before we actually came on board, that was just Asia and barely anything beyond that. So we sold to ESPN in America. We sold to Fox Sports their football in South America. So whether you actually take money from those broadcasters and media partners, it doesn't really matter, because to our point is to kind of raise awareness of the game. Obviously, it's challenging because kick-off time, I mean, the power of live football, it just happens at one moment, right? So the replay has some value, but not really. Once you know what happened, you're probably not going to watch a full game of replay. So live is obviously, the kick-off times are really key. So is that in the middle of the night in the US? Well, sometimes it is. So it's a bit tricky to kind of get that awareness. But the first thing is media distribution. How do you get your product, which is basically our football matches, seen and known, beyond Asia? And then again, social media is there. Digital is there, so you can create some highlights. You can try and have ambassadors from different zones in the world. But yeah, I mean, for now, I think we concentrated to raise the level of the AFC in Asia, so we can really benefit from that and stop having the European football clubs take basically the money of the brands here, because that doesn't make sense. Asian brands should be investing in Asian football and so on. So that's where we concentrate in. But yeah, that's how we do it, media distribution.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions? Okay.
Sorry, just like something personal. You have been in Singapore for like 8 years. So in your entire career, I guess Singapore will be the longest stay.
Yeah.
So do you see yourself progressing further here, or you eventually want to move elsewhere? And how do you see the development in Singapore as everything?
Football or?
Football, branding.
How long do you have? Because that's going to take a while.
2-3 minutes.
So, no, sorry. So myself, just so you know, we've created, actually, with my bosses, we were just a starter. I was one of 6 people when we actually bidded for the AFC. That's how it works. You bid for the commercial rights, and against IMG, against Spot 5, all those guys. And then we won, and then we grew now with 95 people. So that's really exciting when you were part of that startup. Then, so I really want to, go to the top of where I can, go within FMA. And I think Singapore, Asia is a great place for sure. Next for me, I don't know, probably more personal choice, like a life choice, if I want to go back to Europe or if I want to take on the project, within Asia. I've spent a lot of time in Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, where the passion is unbelievable. Now, they just need a bit more professionalism, to be able to kind of crack that next level and become, a bit stronger on the pitch, stronger, more professional off the pitch as well. So there could be also, a great experience to go into those countries and try and help, with this. And Singapore football, it's a conversation of few hours. There's, how to say that in the nicest way, and I really want, Singapore to succeed at some point. And if you take the European model, I think that's probably the best way. The European model is based on every little town and city in the country, let's say England or France, they have a football club, right? And as a kid, it's free to play. It's just you go there, you pay 20 euros for the certification, blah, blah, and you get coaching, and it's based on the voluntarism. So you've got my dad being the bartender one day, and then you being the coach next day, and that's how European football foundations are. Right? This is free, accessible, and everywhere. You've got a pitch in every single. So, okay, Singapore is not as big, but there are means to kind of give more access to kids to play for free. The academies, and don't get me wrong, I'll play for a football club here that has an academy, so I'm completely against it. But this is the wrong model, I believe. The academies that charging kids and parents $6,000 or $7,000, $8,000 a year to just play football is the wrong thing to do, right? So I think there's just need to be a little bit of a change here in terms of a strategy. But there are people in charge that are, capable, and a lot of ex-international players as well. I know football and good coaching, but it needs to make, pitches available. Needs to come to the kids to be able to kind of love the football And you've got plenty of like stars, you know, Fendi and all those guys, Alex Dorich and those guys. They're really, you know, people actually relate to them, so you should use that. But yeah, it's a complex. It's not easy because it's a small country and it's a very complex organization, I believe.
All right, thank you very much. I think those were very honest and open answers from you, which we're very grateful for. It's a breath of fresh air almost, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, that's all the time we have for Mr. Anthony, but please do give him a round of applause. Once again, the VP of Partnership at Football Marketing Asia.